President, we have a national emergency.
This is one of the things that we can shoot first and ask questions later. Normally you can't do that.
All of a sudden these trees started moving out of the way. They parted for me. And then I came out into this opening, and there where I saw Jesus Christ.
Back in 1927, an American socialist, Norman Thomas, 6 times candidate for president on the Socialist Party ticket, said the American people would never vote for socialism. But he said under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program. He is more imminent.
James Madison, in 1788, speaking to the Virginia Convention, said, "Since the general civilization of mankind, I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachment of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations."
When men were free.
Broadcasting live from a secret location buried deep below the earth, you're about to make a connection to the signs of the times. W. Dean Shook is live on the air right now.
And this is your End Time News Update. I am your host, W. Dean Shook, bringing you the news the mainstream media will never touch. We're going to start right off with an exclusive from Breitbart News. Obama plans to import Ebola-infected foreigners from other countries. The news out of New York, contrary to what President Obama and top government officials have said, is that the Ebola crisis appears to be getting worse in the U.S. Judicial Watch is striving to pry loose the truth from recent federal agencies that have responsibilities for public safety and our national security. A key player here is a cryptic carrier known as Phoenix Air. We know this air carrier has been responsible for transporting Ebola victims, but that's all the American people are being told. How safe is Phoenix Air, and what kind of relationship does it have with the U.S. government? Phoenix Air is more than just a medical transport unit. It appears to have significant DoD contracts. One definitive move the administration made is the recent appointment of Ronald Klain as the Ebola czar. Now, Judicial Watch has carefully documented the constitutional problems with the appointment of congressionally unaccountable czars throughout various executive agencies. Klein's involvement in Solandra and the Clinton area fundraising scams shows just how well-credentialed and well-suited he is to represent President Obama. True to form, Klein's appointment shows the Obama White House views Ebola issue as more of a political crisis rather than a public stark safety issue. The Washington Post reports that Klain is tasked with coordinating domestic preparedness efforts and the U.S. military operation to help control the virus spread in West Africa. He'll report to Homeland Security Advisor Lisa Monaco and National Security Advisor Susan Rice, the Post says. But the Federal Emergency Management Agency is also a player, and the Defense Department has a major role. And because it's in Africa, so does the State Department, and so does the Department of Homeland Security. Power in Washington is in distinct relationship to proximity to the president, so a czar operating from the White House exercises powerful influence over these departments, which have a measure of transparency and accountability under the law that the czars do not have. They get away with this kind of stuff because they think we're so stupid we can't figure anything out. Here's an example of that. Listen to this Ebola warning.
People are wondering about methods of transmission, and they're remarkably similar in a way. I mean, blood, mucus, feces, semen, you have to come in intimate contact with it while the person is infected. Now, if you came across some strange mucus or feces or something out there on the subway, the street, or anywhere else, don't eat it. Don't let it get into your body. Don't touch it. And I think...
Well, there you go. We're not even smart enough to avoid eating mucus or feces that we find on the subway or the street. Remember what they said.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste.
And you can find that full story on WDeanShook.com. And here's a WND exclusive. Anti-gun billionaire says we need more school shootings. It didn't take long for some progressives to exploit the tragic shooting in Washington State High School last Friday. They used it in an attempt to gain support for a ballot initiative requiring expanded background checks on all gun transfers in the state within hours of the October 24th shooting that claimed the lives of 2 students at Marysville-Pilchuck High School. One of the billionaire backers of the November 4th ballot initiative posted a link to the story on his Facebook page with the caption, "We need more school shootings. Vote yes on Initiative 591. The posting by Nick Hanauer, a Seattle venture capitalist from a Democratic family, was excused as sarcasm. According to the gun rights advocates in Washington, I-591 would prohibit background checks and has the support of the National Rifle Association. Hanauer is one of the top financial donors to the organization, pushing 1-594, a competing ballot measure that would require background checks on almost all gun transfers, even short-term loans between friends and family members. The Facebook posting by Hanauer was removed sometime late Friday. Meanwhile, the news came Monday morning that a third Marysville student, 14-year-old Gia Soriano, had died overnight of her wounds at a hospital in Everett. Hanauer's comments was just the latest attempt by anti-gun forces to make political hay of someone's loss. This, according to Dave Workman, a resident of North Bend, Washington, and former NRA board member. It was on his Facebook page, now it's gone. He pulled it down, Workman said. It's obvious that the anti-gunners constantly look for things like this to exploit, to move their agenda forward. Of course, their agenda is stiffer gun control. Workman said if a pro-gun person had made such an insensitive comment in the wake of the school shooting, it would have been front page above the fold in all Washington major newspapers and the top story on every major TV networks and local affiliates. And I'm sure that's right. Well, when it comes to gun control, I want to share something with you. My brother Steve shared a story on my Facebook page. Thank you, Steve, for that. And that's Facebook at W. Dean Shook. This was recently posted in the D.C. Gazette. 72 killed resisting gun confiscation in Boston. According to the D.C. Gazette, National Guard units seeking to confess a cache of recently banned assault weapons were ambushed by elements of a paramilitary extremist faction. Military and law enforcement sources estimated that 72 were killed and more than 200 injured before government forces were compelled to withdraw. Speaking after the clash, Massachusetts Governor Thomas Gage declared that the extremist faction, which was made up of local citizens, has links to the radical right-wing tax protest movement. Gage blamed the extremists for recent incidents of vandalism directed against Internal Revenue offices. The governor, who described the group's organization as criminals, issued an executive order authorizing the summary arrest of any individual who has interfered with the government's efforts to secure law and order. The military raid on the extremist arsenal followed widespread refusal by local citizenry to turn over recently outlawed assault weapons. Gage issued a ban on military-style assault weapons and ammunition earlier in the week. The decision followed a meeting in early this month between government and military leaders at which the governor authorized the forcible confiscation of illegal arms. One government official, speaking on condition of anonymity, pointed out that none of these people would have been killed had the extremists obeyed the law and turned over their weapons voluntarily. Government troops initially succeeded in confiscating a large supply of outlawed weapons and ammunition. However, troops attempted to seize arms and ammunition in Lexington met with resistance from heavily armed extremists who had been tipped off regarding the government's plans, and during a tense standoff in Lexington's Town Park, National Guard Colonel Francis Smith, commander of the government operation, ordered the armed group to surrender and return to their homes. The impasse was broken by a single shot, which was reportedly fired by one of the right-wing extremists. 8 civilians were killed in this ensuing exchange. Ironically, the local citizens blamed government forces rather than the radical extremists for the civilian deaths. Before order could be restored, armed citizens from surrounding areas had descended upon the guard units. Colonel Smith, finding his forces overmatched by the mob, ordered a retreat. Governor Gage has called upon citizens to support the state and national joint task force in its effort to restore law and order. The governor also demanded the surrender of those responsible for planning and leading the attack against the government troops. Those people were Samuel Adams, Paul Revere, John Hancock, who have been identified as ringleaders of this extremist faction, and they still remain at large. And this is how the American Revolution began, April 19th, 1775. This anti-gun lobby is nothing new. And WND is reporting that an American detained at Canada border over stance on homosexuality. An American activist scheduled for trial in Canada this week on charges of mischief for providing information about homosexuality has been detained at the border on his way to his court appearance. Peter LaBarbera, president of American for Truth, said on his website Tuesday he was stopped while entering the country late Monday. The trial is set to begin Thursday. Now he must show up for another hearing Tuesday in Regina, Saskatchewan, for further examination of his admissibility into Canada. He said Calgary Border Service agents has confiscated a DVD copy of a new Russian documentary called Sodom as potential hate propaganda in violation of Canadian law. Despite my 2.5-hour detainment in Calgary, agents ordered me to attend another hearing Tuesday with immigration officials, he said. Nevertheless, Border Service agents told me that I'd be able to attend my mischief trial in Regina on Thursday and that I'm innocent until proven guilty under Canadian law. LaBarbera said that, as an American, it's remarkable how far official political correctness, enforced and encouraged by sometimes fanatical left-wing activists and abated by an anti-conservative media, has not only shut down conservative speech in Canada, but succeeded in pushing people who run afoul of various liberal ideologies, not limited to pro-homosexualism. He noted a conservative website, Free Dominion, was forced to shut down after 13 years of operation in January after its owners lost a defamation lawsuit to human rights legal activist Richard Warman. They were fined $107,000, ordered not to publish anything negative about Warman, effectively censoring them out of a public forum. WND reported in April Canadian immigration agents wanted to turn LaBarbera away because of his beliefs about homosexuality. And there's a suit filed to halt work requirements for food stamp recipients in New Mexico. And that story and more right after we come back from this short break.
There is a sense in the world. There's a sense among believers. There's a sense among unbelievers. There's a sense among all peoples that things are unhinged. The Middle East is unhinged with uprisings, revolutions, and where is this heading? How are followers of Jesus to relate to all of these things? How do they relate to biblical prophecy? America is in spiritual, moral crisis. Values are changing, and so rapidly, that have not happened in the history of man. How are level-headed, responsible Christians to relate to the testimony of the biblical prophets and the unfolding of chaos throughout the world? Not just believers are wondering, is this a sign of the end?
We have not massively expanded the welfare state. That's just not true.
Under the Obama administration, food stamp spending has surged. Do you think he is not aware of these numbers?
We have so many people who can't see a fat man standing beside a thin one without coming to the conclusion the fat man got that way by taking advantage of the thin one.
Margaret Thatcher once said, "The problem with socialism is you eventually